Welcome to the Church of MONIKA. Today I have Emily Trice and Christina Steinbrecher-Pfandt. They are both NFT experts, and they will tell you more about what they are working on right now. And I think they're working on it together, right? And yeah, so I'm so happy to have you here.
Thanks so much for the invitation, Monica. Thank you, Michelle. So it's a pleasure to be here, and I think it's a significant time actually for NFTs. And I think the sort of the title a little bit we pre-spoke was what are the benefits and disadvantages or for artists using NFTs, right? And I mean, now we have mid of June 2021, and last year when the pandemic started, there was not yet a notion, let's say, in the mass, in the press, of that NFT will be a big thing, right? So people that have been working in the blockchain industry, they knew what a non-fungible token is, but it wasn't really a thing yet. And then it took pretty much till March this year, February, March, April, to really have it explode. And I think, Michelle, you asked the question, do you think that the pandemic made NFTs that big? And well, I think yes and no. I think NFTs would have made their mass debut anyway. Yeah, I am a strong believer in digital assets or in digital content, and that there is a price to it and there's a value to it, and this value is has a long horizon. But of course that everyone was forced to work at home and stay at home, and the main service of a surface of interaction was the screen. So yes, it became just a daily routine to accept a flat screen and as a given, right? And not to question that you see art or any creative content basically through the screen. This is number one. And number two, crypto came around a while back, and the first basically NFT asset as the CryptoPunk came around in 2017 already. It was issued, and then about a month later, OpenSea was founded. Yeah, so it was actually, and then Super Rare came about, and then Nifty Gateway came about. So this has been long in the making. I mean, fairly long, so to speak, right? I mean, but not as long as digital assets or digital art has been around, right? So the question was there, will we find a tool and a technology to actually transact that digital asset or that digital file, so to speak? So by having that in the pipeline, so CryptoPunks, for example, as a very successful example for a digital asset or for an NFT art, and having a resource like OpenSea that allows to transact NFTs, right? So this has been in the making, and there was a whole scene around it of enthusiasts of that technology that have been engaging more and more. And I'd say in San Francisco, I know like a significant number of people, I'd say, that engaged with the marketplaces, let's say Super Rare, for example, very early on, and they didn't make much money, right? So they just did it. They loved the technology. They loved what it could potentially do. So there was really like this futuristic outlook. Yes, it will allow me to eventually earn for myself. Yeah, so I understand the limitations and the benefits, and it will make money for myself eventually. I understand now I make, I don't know, $30 maybe, or $20. So it was very low, right? It was as a poster would go for, or even less. Yeah, but people were really excited and enthusiastic about it. And well, then lockdown came about. And at the same time, cryptocurrencies grew in value, right? If you bought in early Ethereum, or if you bought in early Bitcoin, this is when we saw like it growing like crazy, right? With Bitcoin prices at around 80,000, or Ethereum prices at what was the highest? I think the highest was like 14K of Ethereum. And yes, people had invested, I don't know, 500 bucks, some put their whole income on it or their whole savings, and now you have a whole group of crypto millionaires, billionaires, entrepreneurs who have been just bidding on it, right? So they have been investing, and now they have that wealth, that digital crypto wealth, and where to put it from. And of course, they put it back into their own community. They appreciate their own community. They truly believe in the significance of it, and they do invest, and they love the interaction around it, because these artists that have been early engaging in NFTs, they can have like an eye-level conversation on the technology, and at the same time they've been appreciating the art, or like you can argue about how well received that art is on the let's say established art world, but there was at least an eye-level conversation. There was a conversation around it. So yes, in the pandemic, everyone there making money on crypto, yes, it went into these marketplaces, and rightfully so, right? So that led to this great explosion, at least in the perception of everyone on the street, that there is this tool. And now is the question, how are we going to use it? So Emily, I would like to ping pong to you. And you are an artist, you've been through the pandemic. And so how has your experience been on the, let's say, on the NFT end and on the pandemic end?
I mean, I would say that I still have a healthy level of skepticism. And I think that any artist who is familiar with kind of market metrics and sort of like speculation in the art market, you know, we all are a little bit wary of kind of setting ourselves up for that sort of, you know, unsustainable kind of factor in terms of like perceived value, just as you said. The thing about the art world and the thing about the blockchain is that they actually reflect one another, both in theory and in practice, right? So in theory, the art world is sort of this utopian place where artists can express, you know, what is fundamental to all of humanity. But in practice, it becomes, you know, an instrument of commerce that can be hoarded by the super wealthy and used as another currency. And I think blockchain is very similar. You know, although when blockchain was first kind of publicized, it was definitely as a means of creating financial transactions without this third-party element. And in that sense, you know, there's something quite Marxist about it, because, you know, in a way you don't have this like intermediary, and the means of production and creation are in the hands of the workers or the proletariat or what have you. So, you know, there's this utopian Marxist side to both the art world and to blockchain. And then there's this sort of neoliberal, hyper-capitalist side. And these two sides, even though they're two sides of the same coin, they're often in constant negotiation, we'll say. So, you know, I think that we've seen a lot of speculators run into the NFT space, clearly. But also what it's done is it's opened up the art market to this entire new community that has been producing art for art's sake, without any hope of like monetary remuneration, you know, in the same way that Dadaists did. And, you know, it also goes back to conceptual artists like Sol LeWitt. You know, I mean, now we have artists selling bananas duct taped to the wall and like, you know, for $120,000 3 times, you know, but even their gallery representatives are saying, well, without the COA, this conceptual artwork is nothing more than its material representation. So I see, you know, what I think is that we're moving now more intentionally, more progressively into this new dematerialized or immaterial economy. And then, of course, you have this other artist selling an invisible sculpture for $20,000, who is also Italian. It makes you wonder, like, what are the Italians? Like, the Italians somehow like have their eye on the prize with this. But I just think that, you know, I have a friend who sold millions and millions and millions of dollars of art through Gagosian, where she was a sales director, through Hauser and Wirth, where she was a sales director. And when I told her, Christina, about your blockchain project, blockchain.art, she had a very difficult time wrapping her head around it, because it really is the immaterial economy, right? And how do we monetize that? And how do we trade it? And how do we transact it? And she just didn't realize that there actually is already this community that's so hyper interested in this value proposition, that like the physical aspect of the piece really is no longer that interesting to them. It's really about, you know, the decentralized nature of the immaterial economy and these new forms of currency and these new values that we place as a society on things like data, which is now the world's most valuable resource, according to The Economist in 2017. So that would be my very long-winded answer to that question.
And yes, and I agree with all of that, but looking at sort of market data, right? So we had this this boom in media, at least for NFT, and we had the market boom with prices at multi-million dollars sold as an NFT. But now, so again, the media really picked up on it because of the high prices, right? So ultimately, they were not as interested talking about it previously, right? So there was, in economy at least, there was a blockchain boom. Yes, cryptocurrencies were already going, press was picking up on it, but the use case of selling art essentially as NFTs was around, as I said, since 17, yeah? So, and the only thing that really got, let's say, enough or good publicity were the CryptoPunks, yeah, or and the CryptoKitties ultimately, but not any of the other artists, as Kevin McCoy, right, who went at the Sotheby sale for 1 million something now. So he deployed it in 2014, and sort of no one really picked it up, yeah. And so the press really just got on it when this multi-million dollar sales occurred. So this is when it's like, how did we miss that? But it didn't implode, but the market obviously cooled down right now, right? And
I would say it's self-corrected.
Yeah, I think it's self-correction, but me as an entrepreneur and coming from the established art world, this is where I say, and this is what I always saw, that basically the professional art world has to come in, right? So, and you, MONIKA, you, Michelle, as the open source gallery, right? It would, like, this is what I'm saying, like, yes, please. And that's why I was really excited when you asked us to come on and speak about NFTs. I think, yes, when institutions, non-for-profits, for-profits actually really try to wrap their heads around, and really it's like to understand how can we use the NFT technology and the certificates underlying it, how can we make it part of our institution, like a significant part of our business, yeah? And then, so also being that marketplace, being that mediator, being that storyteller on behalf of the artists, yeah, and really making that case and being there, and explain also on the other side to your collectors and to people that you have been nourishing for the last years, right? So that come around, that is your community, and explaining to them why it's now worth to buy artists that you show in form of an NFT. I think this is really where I see what Emily said is like the self-correction. Yes, cryptocurrency prices have fallen, so people are less inclined to spend just in their crypto community, though they're like asking now, okay, where's this artist from? What is the story of this artist? So there needs to be right now really professional players that come into the game and just use it as a regular tool. This is how I see it for yeah, as a next step to really make it part of their business. Yeah, and in similar way as different but still similar adaptation to new technology with social media. When social media came around, and it was first obviously in the college campuses, but then it basically swept over to people, influencers, they use influencers, and then also the art world was confronted by social media, and everyone was like, oh my God. I just remember that moment in my career when we in Vienna, so I was running the fair in Vienna, we're like, okay, galleries, we will do a workshop for you how to use social media. It was really at the early, when I just came to Vienna, and in Moscow, social media was really advanced. Everyone was on it. The whole art world was communicating. And when I came in Vienna, so my colleagues are like, why are you always posting stuff on Facebook? You know? And I'm like, it's not, and I haven't been posting food. I've been posting articles, but I like readings and exhibitions, but I was doing it really a lot. And then it was this moment when it was adopted, right? When it wasn't only like painful at the beginning, it was painful. Oh man, me as a gallery, I don't know, I have 2 people, 2.5 people have now to do everything that I do anyway now on social media. That was really painful, but the adaptation sort of worked. And now we have the fruits of it, that people are selling online, that nourish a community that can't make it physically to them. And this is what I think is really the critical moment for blockchain adaptation in business, yeah, and in art business, so to speak, is really that businesses and institutions adopt it as part of their economy, of their business model. Yeah, and I mean, as I know, galleries and I think along the way there will be many technical questions, right, that everyone will have to face ultimately. But I think, as to my knowledge, most of the galleries have been working and showing digital art for however long. Yeah, so I don't know any gallery that hasn't been showing any digital work. Yeah, so the most sort of I don't know, established or traditional, they had here and there video, they had here and there like a digital image shown somewhere. And I think just really to realize, and Emily, you've been quoting your friend from that is in the blue chip market, so to speak, that she had a hard time wrapping her head around it. And that's been like on my journey as an entrepreneur in that space, been actually the most fascinating. I'm like, but you've been always showing digital art. Why is that so hard to actually believe that you can now sell it properly, right? Why is it so hard? You've been showing it all along, and you did it out of true belief that this is good artwork, one, otherwise you wouldn't have shown it. B, in the belief in that it adds to that show that you've been producing. Why? And I tested my product with many, I don't know, young galleries, mid-range galleries, established galleries, blue chip galleries. And still last summer, so for me, the June date is quite interesting actually, because still last summer I was testing the alpha version of our product. And I was taking, so the alpha version is just really rough coded, very simple, but it basically shows the steps, just very rudimentary. And it's like, are you sure that digital art will be like sold like that? Because we didn't have any success for the last 30 years. So why do you believe it will actually work? And I said, what else, right? So how, I mean, everyone is going digital. What else should happen other than that we would be selling digital art and there will be a market? So yeah, that being said, I don't know, Emily, how your experience is also with galleries that you've been working with, their questions and their hesitation, let's say, to NFTs.
I think that everyone is excited about, if we break it down to like benefits for artists and disadvantages, like in many ways, the benefits far outweigh the disadvantages. Like NFTs are really taking nothing away, they're just adding. right? So they're adding a new revenue stream, for example. But if you think about, you know, sort of all of the use cases of like a digital certificate of authenticity that accompanies even like a physical work, you know, it doesn't even have to just be digital art. It can just be an addendum to a physical piece. And I think that that's really important because it's a way to track provenance. It's a way to build in royalties to artists. And it's a way to also, you know, allow artists to continue to benefit from their cultural output in perpetuity. And in America, this doesn't happen. And I think that that is like one of the biggest disadvantages of the art market in the States. And so, you know, when talking to galleries and artists and curators and what have you, you know, I was even talking to a woman who started like a art fund that's raising 100 million British pounds to invest in like, you know, African blue chip art. She's so excited about the aspect of royalties that you can build into these smart contracts that are part of the NFT, right? And so the artists can continue to profit off the sales of their work. But in general, when it comes to property of any kind, you know, possession is still like 9/10 of the law or whatever they say. And people have been having issues in the NFT ecosystem with their NFTs disappearing out of their wallets. And so, you know, that sort of points to the fact that this technology is so new and so emerging that it's not perfect yet. I was speaking to a woman named Lucy Wang, who's the founder of like an early pre-seed stage VC company called Divergent Capital. And she pointed out that, you know, artificial intelligence has been around since the 50s, right? And you go through these processes, we'll call it like a very long winter and then a spring, you know, and then like another winter again. And, you know, it ebbs and flows as the technology grows and everybody is like really invested in it. Everyone is looking at it. And there's maybe like a spectacle event that draws in, you know, the popular culture's attention, because we're also in the attention economy, of course, you know, and then it kind of maybe like dissipates a little bit and this, you know, people are still working on it and then it will come back. And this will continue for many decades. So, you know, in relation to AI, blockchain is still sort of like in its nascent phase. And because of that, you know, we are figuring out what the technology can do and what it still needs to learn how to do. And I think that you see that with this white hat hacker who hacked Beeple's wallet, right? Because the Beeple Christie sale was like the sort of spectacle, I would say, of coronavirus in a sense, you know, if you want to talk from an art world perspective, okay? Like, I don't think I'm alone by saying my jaw hit the floor. I couldn't believe it. And then you have all these articles coming out using words I never thought I would see in like a serious critical discussion of a major auction sales event, you know, and now we're talking about, you know, people like Metavan and Troubadour and the IPFS, interplanetary file system, right? And like these are real people and real things, but they exist in like a dematerialized, you know, decentralized sort of other underlying society. But there really is no differentiation. Like they are, you know, part of the normal art market. And I think that we're going to see that happen more and more. So in general, I think that there is some trepidation on the side of like the established art world, but we've seen this for decades. There's always been a bit of hesitation when it comes to new technology. And actually this woman and her, let me just make sure I have her last name accurate. So Frida Isingoma, who's the founder and CEO of Kisa LLC, which is this fund for blue chip African art. Her feeling is that the art world has long been afraid of technology because technology brings regulation, right? And technology enables data mining, okay? Like we're not really mining like the, you know, we're not mining for coal so much anymore, we're mining for data, right? Because data is the world's most valuable resource now. And so her feeling was that the art market kind of pumps the brakes on anything too technological because it fears that regulatory aspect coming in. Of course, my argument is, you know, if you're selling art to arms dealers as a way so they can launder their money, like we don't really want you in the ecosystem. Like you can go, you know? So I think that there will be more self-corrections and that we're just gonna sort of, you know, I mean, we're very lucky in a sense to witness this new era of art history because that Beeple sale was really a turning point, you know? And unfortunately, often monetary value can equate to cultural value, or at least, you know, the majority of society's perception of cultural value. And so that one event, which in my mind was really a PR stunt, you know, might have actually ushered in this new era of, you know, the immaterial or dematerialized economy. So
I think, yes, it was like, this is when you heard the bells ringing and everyone sort of was trying at least to catch up. And that's actually, I think, fantastic for anyone who's been working in the digital field as an artist or galleries who've been showing that. I think that has been fantastic. But at the same time, let's say the adoption on actually institutions and artists adopting an NFT or selling on chain has been not as fast, right, as the Beeple sale. So that was like a singled out, let's say, artist participant who made that at this market rate, and we've been sort of betting. So we were sort of a small circle. We've been not surprised that it actually went that high, because the Ethereum price was just rocketing at that moment, and so we were hoping that it would catch the biggest price, to be honest, right? So we were actually hoping so that this would get attention, that technology. So we're like, yay. I mean, we didn't study every single work. No, we didn't. So this Tim Schneider did, so, and good for him. So that was good. But this is now, so how we see, and this is what I think is very important for Emily, what you said is, yes, there will be also, let's say, waves of correction of how to use that, or that associated technology with NFT, for example. Yeah, so there are questions of how can actually an NFT that has been bought disappear, for example, right? So out of a wallet, but essentially it's not out of a wallet, but it's out of IPFS immediately, right? So there will be, let's say, adaptations, and like my blockchain engineer says, you will have a menu as a user to choose from what sort of technology you transact. So the transaction will happen on the blockchain. Either you will do it, or you will hand over to a company to do that service for you. And then with regard to storage of that file, either there will be like sort of a select menu. How do you want to have it stored? Do you want to put it in IPFS? That implies a certain transparency, yeah, and the that you can have access, and that anyone can access, quite frankly, to that file in that resolution, how you sold it. Do you want it that? Or I expect basically the next generation and the next iteration is, yes, you sell a certificate, but you choose the way you save and you secure that artwork and that file.
I like to use these physical kind of analogies, you know, for people, because I think it's easier to wrap their heads around it. But it's like, if you bought a Picasso, would you store it in a storage space that like everyone in the world had a key to? You know, and like maybe they're not like allowed to take it out of the storage space, but like they could still kind of like put things on top of it or like do things to it. It's like that doesn't necessarily engender a lot of trust, right? And like the blockchain is supposed to take out the necessity of trust. It's supposed to like remove that completely. Like you don't have to trust anyone. You don't need a third party. Like we've automated it, and there's like, you know, algorithms doing all the work basically, but that's also not entirely true. You know, that's just sort of how it's been kind of explained to the masses, you know. But once you get into like under the hood, you're like, wait a minute, I don't know.
But my expectation is that so I mean, do you remember the time e-commerce came around, right? This was even before social media, right? So when e-commerce and companies were adopting selling things online, and then eventually it became possible that everyone could sell things online, right? That was a big revolution of point-to-point sales interactions, right? This was amazing. I mean, then you have to do the logistics, but this was possible. So ultimately what we have is that every museum sells things online. If I stay in the institutional world, right? And galleries have also, when they have things that they can sell online, whether it's books, prints, editions, they do sell online, and they're getting, and you have better tools to do that show real-time inventory. So that's been hard sort of on the sales end, but this has gotten better and better. So my 100% expectation and what I see is that basically everyone who has content and who has the IP for that content will be able and will learn what to sell as an NFT and what not to sell as an NFT, yeah? And we'll have an NFT shop as part, or NFT shop sounds like, I don't know, accessories, but like an NFT art sales point as part of their website, right? And artists and intermediaries will learn what channel to choose to distribute which asset, so to speak, right? Is it an edition? Is it a huge edition, sort of a print style museum poster? Why not? Yeah. Or is it a unique piece? I don't know, that one documentation of that performance that is like a one-of-one that goes maybe through a different sales channel. And I think what we also see, and I would ask you, but I think it's a main concern, especially from the traditional art world, is, and I don't mean traditional art world as sort of behind on online. I mean it in an absolute respectful way, as in on the forefront of actually caring about the environment. Yeah, so because many of the global art institutions and global galleries have been really investing as institutions and as galleries into researching offsetting, how to offset their carbon footprint, have been really studying what carbon footprint they produce by running an institution, and just really getting their head around it. And I think this is, and several have installed even directors to really track that and how to improve that. So I think this notion of, can I really feel good about myself when I actually sell NFTs, right? And I think many artists, and Emily, I would then ask you also to comment on that, are asking themselves, can I really do that soundly, right? So I've been seeing the calculations of NFTs, and I mean, yes, you can argue what is the footprint if you do the same physically, if you ship it, et cetera, et cetera. That's one conversation, right? But we expect that the digital is actually just much easier and will be mass adopted and will go just much quicker. So the question is, do you want to be a participant of something that you understand is causing harm? Yeah, and I think this is, again, and being sort of changing my own personality from the art world more towards a tech environment, so to speak. Yeah, and what I learned being in a tech environment and being in the startup world in tech is really to look at the world as a continuum, right? So it never stays. It just doesn't stay, right? So it was really so you can demand it, but the understanding of the tech world is, yes, we're moving. Maybe tomorrow it looks completely different than today, yeah? And we're on that continuum, and yes, of course, we will use less energy going forward, yeah? And there are already chains, so blockchains, right? So the main adopted chain for NFT sales and transactions has been Ethereum. And that has several reasons. So that deploying on the Ethereum chain, that there developer that can do that. So the resource power is there to launch a project on Ethereum, and Ethereum made it sort of easy, and you can do it, and it's a multi-purpose chain. So it's not only for the art world, or it's not only for any sort of industry, but everyone came on it, and it was really easy, and people learned from each other. It's like, hey, I did that and it was actually really easy. So the other one came in and said like, oh yeah, it worked really nice. But yes, and I think the concern is there, of course, that it's proof of work, and that it's using, again, so if you want to like argue the other perspective of like, what do you do if you would calculate your footprint in physical terms? But if we take that to side, if say like, yes, it does consume energy, and it does consume significant energy, but Ethereum itself also is working to actually deploy a new chain, yeah, so that will use proof of stake. But also there are other chains that are already existing and that are being used that use the proof of stake versus the proof of work, yeah. So it's, and so basically my company, we are in the Polkadot ecosystem and building our own chain in it that is using the proof of stake. And this is exactly like one of the reasons we have chosen to do it in Polkadot. But you can, as the end user or as a participant of that, you will have choices of chains, maybe not as multifaceted as, I don't know, 5 years from now, or 2 years or 3 years from now. And there you will be as in, I don't know, an e-commerce solution that you choose right now, right? Or a data storage solution right now, you will choose for yourself and you'll say, okay, that makes sense for me, that doesn't make sense for me, what are the costs associated to it? So I think it is fair to say, yes, I mean, I'm as who came on the blockchain train in 2017, yeah, so who joined that community, I'm just absolutely thrilled that it's been like, it got that exposure, maybe not in a way why I came to it, right? So because my notion was, when I joined that community and I was in San Francisco and learning about the chain, and my co-founder was like, yeah, here, you should join that community because you will learn and this will be interesting. I said like, yes, this is a solution for the arts, right? And so like, let's do something about it. But I came with that notion, well, fantastic, because it's borderless. Transactions can be finally made borderless. Representation can be made much easier for continents or for groups that hasn't been represented significantly on the international global stage, yeah. So, and this was truly my main motivation. I was burning for it. I was like, yes, this is just absolutely, this is the tool to sort of bring more equality into the art world. This was my main flag that I was running by, yeah. And I was not, I mean, my fascination doesn't necessarily lies in the technology itself, but what the technology can do, right, for artists and for bringing questions up and really interacting. What happened now is, of course, slightly different. So there was a lot of like the speculation bubble that came in, but what I'm just saying, that technology is still there. It has shown that it works. And now it's sort of the question of, I'd say people like that do companies like me that come with a value proposition to the significant participants that I think make a strong difference, right? That have a voice and have a following and can reach people. It's one, and there are several people like me that really are thinking about the arts in the first place when doing something. And then also, let's say, the openness of the community, of the art community, to really learn ultimately, right? It's not as really, as e-commerce was adopted and as social media was adopted by the art industry, so people got better in it, right? So meaning, and there you can also talk about like attention commerce, but people got better in it, like telling their stories, I don't know, making better photos or whatever it took to grow their community and their outreach and get an understanding of what exact people do we want to reach. Yeah. And I think here, everyone will, and dealers and galleries and artists, they will know better their own community, right? And it's not that artists make art for their community, they make art for themselves, but ultimately with that sort of, but still with the goal, yes, I need to make a living on my art because I need to pay rent, I have my studio. So that's an underlying one. And not everything what you will be producing, you will be selling as an NFT, right? So I think that will be a learning curve, as in what makes sense for me as a channel, either for you as open source gallery, right? Or for any other participant, what is sort of sensible for me to sell as an NFT, for example, right? Or what is the story that I want to convey, and what underlying marketplace or solution, e-commerce solution do I want to use? So sorry, that was a long one, but I thought it made sense. Sorry.
I think that you know, I would never suggest to an artist like, oh, you've been painting your whole life, but now you should like make GIFs, you know, or GIFs or whatever. It's like you should make the art that you make, you know, and figure out how this new technology can work for you, and how you can make sure that it doesn't like sabotage your efforts or sabotage your pre-existing support system or sabotage your legacy, quite frankly, you know. I think that you know, with digital artists, it was like, oh, finally, you know. I know several digital artists who are quite well known in like their communities, but have never really received, you know, the commercial or critical attention because their art just like wasn't easy to display. So institutions were a bit like, ooh, you know, like, I don't know about these sensors, and like, I don't know about this hardware, and I don't know how to turn on this like Max MSP program. And I mean, it's a lot, right, of learning. And so because of that, this was a quite marginalized part of the art and creative ecosystem. And now they're like, wee, like, yay, like it's not, you know, and everyone's like, yeah, like, I think that's great, right? So that's good. But then you have artists who have been making material-based works, and they're kind of like, well, what do I do? Like, what do I do now? And I would say to them, like, you know, have you ever been interested in animation or video? Like, you know, you could experiment with that now. So there's the artist Swoon, who I think is quite well known in Brooklyn and globally, and I am a huge fan of her and I love her. And she's extremely socially active, right? She's what we would probably call a citizen artist. And she kind of moves across borders, and she invests back into sort of like disenfranchised and at-risk communities. So she's done projects in Haiti, and she's done projects in Braddock, Pennsylvania. And, you know, definitely that is part of her practice, I would argue. And what's great for Swoon is that she's been sort of like dabbling in animation for the past, you know, like handful of years. And now there's an NFT gallery in New York that has sold like 3 of her videos as NFTs for like $11,000 each, right? And like they can put in those smart contracts, like Swoon gets this percent, the gallery gets that percent. And also these other causes, these other, you know, sort of like participation-based, you know, sustainable activities that Swoon kind of spearheads, like she can also, you know, divert proceeds directly to those. And so everybody kind of comes up together. Like there's nothing about that that's not good, except the environmental impact, right? And so that's when it's like, okay, well, maybe this isn't the right platform for us, you know? And it's just really a matter of time, because so many people are so engaged in this topic of how do we make this more sustainable? And, you know, when we talk about proof of work, we talk about proof of stake, right? These are consensus mechanisms, right? And this is how the blockchain kind of grows and sustain itself. And it can only really do that because the miners are incentivized through receiving this cryptocurrency when they successfully mine a block to, quote, stay in the network, right? If there wasn't that incentive, it's possible that it would fall apart, at least in the early stages. So proof of work required quite a lot of computational energy, and the miners were rewarded in Bitcoin. Now we move over to proof of stake, requires much less computational energy, but the reward is also less. However, the people that are mining there are incentivized by this eco imperative, right? And to them, that is the incentive to stay in that network. And artists who maybe don't want to be like hypocrites are going to be incentivized to go into that chain rather than this other chain, because at the end of the day, I think that most artists have maybe, some trouble reconciling these two sides of their life, which is like the production and like the theory and the idealism and the commerce and, the sales aspect and the shipping and, the storage and all of these things. So this has been kind of going on for a while. And I think that, the more people get engaged in these networks, the quicker we're going to find the solution,
And I think what the term came even after that short period of time, NFT hate, right? And I think a lot of that term was coined by money, and by sort of outrageous prices that were achieved in a very short time. So I think, Emily, by you quoting that she sold the video for $11,000, I mean, that's a good price. I mean, just, so it doesn't...
Yeah, 3 of them, I think. It's awesome.
The edge, if we can take just this heat out, right? And I think everyone is sort of professional, and also the art market has seen growth and then a decrease and then growth again, right? So there's been like different ups and downs. And I think if we take the pressure out for doing auctions, right? Then that you actually have to do an auction, and then you have to prove that this is sort of the best price ever achieved, and just really use it as a standard business tool, right? So as a business channel, as a business tool, and not be concerned with the financial maximalism, so to speak,
right,
that has been pushed that envelope so hard. Yeah. And I think this is where the hate comes from, because yes, there's been obviously a lot of conversation about the ecological concerns, but sort of the or let's say the hard to grasp moment of that artists that are not known before, but in that sort of very short amount of time have achieved that prices that haven't been achieved basically in a lifetime of very established, very professional, not necessarily extremely financially well-off artists, but just sort of that have been in that community and have been providing and putting in their artistic work. That has been obviously mind-blowing, right? And sort of this idea that this is a speculation that had an impact, I think, on people just reading the papers. And it's like, oh, 96 million, oh, 30,000. Like that was a quick one. My point is really, and to take that mark that this is about money. It's a tool where you sell, but that to take out this financial maximalism pressure out of it and just really more making it as an everyday tool. I think this is my my ambition basically to bring that across, that there's no need to compete. Yeah, right now it's a lot of...
I think that is a very feminine kind of attitude, and I'm hoping that this sort of like hyper networked new society adopts more of like a feminist kind of methodology, because really I would agree with you. Like competition is great to a point, but really shouldn't we all be working, like everything is in concert with everything else, and like Donna Haraway is a philosopher that's gotten like a lot of attention lately. And even though, there's some like dystopian aspects to this like cyborg theory, it's like, look, we are integrating with technology on like a biological level now. and we all need to work together to save, you know, the biological aspects of our shared habitats. You know, and I think in the art world, you know, you start to see some of these galleries that, you know, I just feel like David Swerner Gallery is frankly run by a group of women. And I love the way that they saw the challenges that the pandemic was presenting. And they were like, we're going to open up our website, which gets like, you know, X million hits, whatever, to these sort of emerging upstart contemporary, like hip galleries. And we're going to spread that love around a little bit. You know, so yeah, I agree. If we could adopt that attitude that we should all work together to solve these problems, like it's going to be better. And it doesn't have to be about like winner takes all. That's never been a sustainable model for anything, frankly. You know, I think that we'll all be better for it. But, you know, to say that the technology is like so new and like so emerging that it's intimidating, it's like, well, you know, QR codes have been around for a long time, right? But I think only during pandemic where people like, oh, I have to look at this menu through a QR code, and suddenly it's like really in the, you know, in the zeitgeist, like if people understand it, which I think is amazing because it bridges the physical and the digital. And I'm really into that. I really want to see more of that, you know? And so I feel like I'm always harping on this like RFID chip, right? So the radio frequency ID chip, I have one in my cat. I put a chip in my cat so that my cat, if she runs away, I can find her in the internet, right? Like we all chip our pets, but you're gonna make a painting and devote like months of your life to this painting, right? And they're just gonna send it off and have no idea where it is, you know, and you're gonna trust your gallerist or trust this curator or trust the shippers, trust whoever. It's like, put an RFID chip in there and then you can link it to the blockchain. You can see where it is. It can be constantly updated in real time and it's immutable. I've literally had shippers drop off someone else's like Calder to me, someone else's Picasso to me. And if I wasn't a nice woman and hadn't called them back and said, hi, you dropped off the wrong artwork to me, right? Meanwhile, there's some gallery, right, in their art fair booth, like having a complete panic attack because they don't know where their Picasso is because they didn't put a chip in it. It's like, I just feel like everyone kind of needs to get with the program, get out of their own way and do what is smart and best for these cultural products. You know, I've also sent video art to various like institutions on like a USB drive, never saw it again. No one knows where it went, right? Because it's like this big, they lost it, it's gone. So, you know, I think that a lot of artists will relate to that issue and maybe like they've gotten works back damaged or works have been like, you know, sent to the wrong place or who knows what. But, you know, when we saw the Indigo Philbrick scandal happen, where like all of these like big time investors gave this like 33 like dashing young dealer, you know, like millions and millions and millions of dollars, and then they have no idea where the painting that they own like a fraction of went. You know, it's like, well, this would have fixed that. Like you wouldn't have had that problem because you could have been like, why is my painting that you say I own at someone else's house? You know? So I just think that there's so many applications of this technology and it all works together and we can like marry the physical and marry the digital, you know, and we can work as a cybernetic system. The art ecosystem is a cybernetic system, right? And it's just time for us to like, you know, show up to the tech party and it's been happening, but you're going to have pushback. I have this print behind me on the wall of when Hunter S. Thompson ran for sheriff in Aspen. And he had this great quote where he was like, you know, that great pendulum of history, like she swings. And it's like, you know, it's gonna like, everyone's gonna rush in and then everyone's gonna kind of like back out and like rush in again. And I think that this is just, you know, sort of like the natural rhythm of social adaptation of, you know, new tools and technologies. So.
I do have a few questions. And
okay.
Yeah, and like somehow you know, we're talking a lot about, I mean, I get it. And I'm all with you. And I think we have to really go with that. You know, I think digital work has been totally, yeah, there hasn't been a good idea for that yet. And I like also that the digital work it doesn't have to be only digital work, but it can be also, like you just said. So, but it's also a sales tool, but is it also possibly an exhibition tool, or, you know, could it be an art fair? Can it also be used as like for conceptual art as like a tool, you know, in more, also in some kind of a visual way?
There
So-
are different ways to make these things, you know, collector's items. And I actually just saw an email from Scope Art Fair that they're releasing, I guess it's their 20th anniversary this year. So they're going to release VIP Scope tickets for the 20th anniversary as NFTs that are also linked to limited edition artworks by artists like Logan Hicks, who's sort of like a famous street artist. You know, and in that way, you have these multi-purpose NFTs that can do many different things at once, right? And I think that makes them attractive, especially if they're connected to an institution, cultural or other that, you know, you're personally invested in. So really, you know, the application potential is quite limitless, in my opinion. Christina, do you have thoughts on that?
I think to be sort of very concrete, ultimately it's just a file, right? So ultimately it's a file, and some artists will have very strong opinions if how to display it, right? So if you would really ask them, like, how do you want an NFT or not? How do you want this video or this still or that be installed, if to be installed in a physical way, right? So you can also mark basically how it's to be installed or what screen the artist would recommend to use when installing, for example.
Yeah,
right?
what resolution? Yeah.
What resolutions, and also going forward. And it's also that artists, and this has been the case, so when they sold an NFT, a collector would ask them, for example, privately, when they would connect on Twitter or wherever, they're like, hey, can I print this? And the artist would say, well, yes, but I recommend that and that size. Not that this print is the holder, is the valuable item. It's from a technical perspective, it's just a piece of paper with print on it, right? So because the certificate is the one that is basically the most valuable, plus the artwork, and as it's a file. But yes, artists have been giving permission to print something, for example. Yeah, so you can also have a physical. If someone wants, can I do it? Can I put it up physically? Yes, or blueprints, for example, for even printing a sculpture, so to speak, right? So you put up a file, it's a blueprint to 3D print a sculpture. So this way of connecting, as Emily said, the physical with the digital, yes, yeah, so that's gonna come. And I think right now, what you see mostly as NFT shows, they are very standard black screens, what sort of have been popping up. But of course, this will transact. I mean, if we now have to buy digital and show it on very standard size screen, I mean, that's really boring for art, right? So I think this will be then again a communication piece of either the owner or the curator to say, like, how do we and NFT in that way can become only the technical tool that it sits on and displayed in a variety of means. I cannot hear.
Yeah, that sounds great. You hear me now, right?
Yes, yeah.
I just had to open the door really quickly, but I heard you. Yeah, no, that sounds great. We had this. There's an NFT that I found very interesting, and it's an artist that showed with us, Khaled. He made a political work out of it. So he's a Palestinian artist. And after the ceasefire, he put out an NFT about home ownership in Palestine. And I think something like this, I find also extremely interesting, that there is now this possibility of making noise. Like one thing that you said about what you were initially thinking about, right? Opening it up also to parts of the world where the market is maybe not quite as strong. So that brings me also maybe to this question. So does that really play out right? Like, does it really play out the way we are seeing it now, that the market is similar in America than in Palestine, for example? Is that artwork the same value, or is that going to be, are we going to judge it again like we are usually judging it with?
So ultimately, the technology can be as global and international as anything that is online, right? So this is one. But I see basically that, for example, I had 2 conversations with founders on the African continent, and they've been saying, well, we just want, first instance, we just want to make our own marketplace for the African continent, right? So because we feel we have strong artists, one, and we just want to do that because it's easier for us than to talk to anyone in the US or anywhere to raise money. We just want to do it for our community. Yeah. And also, first step, do it for our community and get people involved that are close to that community. Right. And then, yes, we look globally, but first we want to do something for our community, like inward looking, right? We want to do something for our, and then I spoke to another startup in the Caribbean, and they do sort of the same. They're like, we want to congregate artists from the Caribbean regions and just give them a platform so that they can, and not every artist obviously from that region will say, yes, that's great, because I feel like I have that only Caribbean story. But he said, I have a significant number of artists that want to be just part of that platform that has sort of power. If we come together, we have that certain power and we will be heard together, more than me as a sort of newcomer or that hasn't made a debut internationally, globally, as an alone standing artist, right? So they want to unite first and then see how they can coexist or interact with the international scene, right? How then they can, I don't know, dock to another marketplace, do exchanges from marketplace to marketplace. But in terms of sort of regional, I've been speaking to founders that are mainly driven by art, right? So they have like but they care about that community that they represent, right? And they say, listen, they don't have the means to understand what we do right now, right? So I would have to educate them strongly. So I rather do something for my community, and then I present them as a bigger voice to the international community. I feel that's going to be more successful than picking here and there, because we need sort of that power. But yes, so in terms of what it's worth, depending on the platform, right? So it's depending then on the platform, and sort of whether some of these artists will be then sort of cherry picked and then be promoted to like a more financially supported, VC supported marketplace, and then it's already then the forces of the market, so to speak, right? That will have a hand and have a go at it. But I do believe strongly that new artists will get a stage. Mm-hmm. Yeah, will get a stage, because also collectors, and I think this is what I haven't maybe spoken about, I think it's really important to get, I mean, you have people that are feel comfortable in the crypto world, that know how to use a wallet, but also you have, frankly, big art collectors, institutions that collect, private people, companies, yeah, that they get excited mm-hmm. by the technology of an NFT, yeah, so by digital art, frankly, that they can buy it, that it's a certain worth, they can put it in their balance sheet, right, and that they understand this is the ownership certificate, there are 3 of them, the artist agrees on that, has signed the paper, so that it's really clearly communicated, that it's in a contract, and that everything is clear about how to own a digital artwork, so to speak, right? That they are getting really excited. And I think this is why I feel strongly about intermediaries, because you will be ultimately the one who will be explaining and will be doing this educational work, right? They're of course being bombarded from the outside, but actually going to a trusted source that you've been going to for the last 10 years, for the last 5 years, and say, hey, what do you think about this? Do you have actual artists that engage in it? Like, is there anything good? Have they been doing anything good? And you're like, yeah, of course. I have these amazing digital artists. You've seen them in my show, but now you can buy it not on a USB stick, but you can buy it as an NFT from cloud, right? And I think these are the services and the educational services that are invaluable, right? So that are invaluable, that people can go to their trusted intermediary where they've been buying and kind of like, what do you think about it? Yeah, will you engage in it? When you engage, then I'm your customer, I'm your loyal customer. I'll go with that because I know the artist. I've been loving this artist. I just never like really understood how digital files are managed, but now it's transparent. Now it's on chain. Now I can look it up. Well, I'm your loyal customer for the next 20 years, right? So that's sort of the attitude that I'm looking for, yeah, and that I expect to happen.
I mean, it's also like an artist in Palestine or like, you know, I mean, an artist in like a war zone can publish a digital artwork, sell it, and get paid without having to cross borders, without having to ship anything. I mean, that is, you know, like a new democratic, I mean, democratization of the art world was like such a buzzword maybe like 6 years ago that I think it's kind of lost its, you know, vitality in a sense. But like, really, isn't that sort of like what we all want? Because like the, you know, the nation state borders, they solve certain problems, they create other problems, you know, and I think that they have disabled a certain level of participation, you know, and then also with like physical objects and like the costs associated with moving those physical objects around. You know, I remember friends of mine, you know, that lived in Germany would be going to an art fair in like Sao Paulo, and it was literally impossible to ship the art in because of certain customs restrictions. So they would ship the artist and the artist would make the work in Sao Paulo, right? Because like, so it's like, there's always creative ways to get around things in a sense, but like what's great about sort of like, you know, the internet economy and like the, you know, decentralized economy of like the crypto world is that those borders don't really mean anything unless, of course, if you're like China and you don't accept cryptocurrency, you're not allowed access to like the same internet that we're all on. But just like that aside, you know, it is a way to, you know, leap over these also imaginary borders that like society has created, right? Like they're not even real, but we've made them real. And then we put all of this like administrative bureaucracy around them to make it really difficult to move across, you know? So, I mean, but again, this is the utopian side of a two-sided coin, you know?
So, you know, I just thought of that, and that's maybe just totally ridiculous, but you know how as a not-for-profit, it's actually not so easy to sell art, right? I mean, you have to always, it's not like we can't sell art, we just have to kind of go around weird ways and artists donating back and whatever, you know, like that kind of stuff. But yeah, do we avoid any of these problems by going through NFT? Not really, right?
I think you can, because it can be written into the smart contract that the artist agrees that a certain percentage of royalties or profits are going to then be donated to this particular institution. And actually now there are new consensus protocols. And like what Christina was describing before about like, you know, you're the intermediary, you're kind of the interpreter, right? You are the sales funnel to a certain degree, or at least the promotional funnel, you're the exhibition funnel. Like something comes in, like the art comes in and then it comes out through your filter, you know, in a new way that like your audience can engage in it. You know, I think that that you're going to play an extremely important role, continue to play an extremely important role in this economy. And also you should benefit from it because you've been invested in this economy, right? So everyone who's been invested in any way that they can should come up with the whole economy in a sense, you know? But again, that's like a little bit socialist, you know, it's a little bit Marxist, but like that's the ideal. That's what we want because you deserve, you know, to essentially like have like an ROI, like a return on your investment, you know, for a business term. Christina, do you want to say something about that? I had another thought, but I've lost it. So maybe it will come back to me.
I mean,
actually, I remembered it. The consensus protocols. The consensus protocol, there's proof of work, proof of stake, and then there's going to be proof of donation. at some point. So proof of donation, we don't know quite yet what that looks like, but it's possible that there will also be entirely separate blockchains set up and programmed just for nonprofits.
Mm-hmm. Right. Because I mean, we could. I know, you go.
I think so you, in terms of you getting taxed, so the taxation, if a collector buys something, they pay tax on value increase, right? So the person who buys an NFT doesn't have to pay VAT, but pays taxes on investment, on the increase of investment. But I mean, the regulators are behind it, so there will be soon very clear guidelines how to sell sort of on paper and really documented NFTs, like in a regulatory framework that will be clean cut for everyone. Right now, it's there are gray zones, but obviously, since I had just huge difficulties to find an insurance for my company because it's like everyone's like, this is so new, we have no idea how to deal with that. So you end up like 30 times, 40 times like the times X and insurance. They're like, okay, we believe this is what you do, it's like e-commerce, but we're just gonna ask 40 times the insurance premium just to be on the safe side, and so you end up, so they quoted me like 300,000 a year just for a year, and I'm like, so it's sort of that new. What I'm trying to convey to you, right? It's an economy of digital goods that is new, right? That is new, and that all the institutional economical institutions are grappling and coming to terms with right now, right? And I think also the government and the regulatory body, especially in the US, wants people to make money, right? So it's like the economy is set up in a way that people are enticed, so to make it sort of transparent and fairly easy to do so, and I think this is at least always the sort of the thinking and how everything is phrased out. So I think here the regulator is grappling on to what it is, what's actually being sold, because you don't, at least in a USB stick, you sort of, it's a USB stick, something to it. So but here it's just the transaction on chain that's occurring. So, but I expect, and this is what's going on with cryptocurrency exchanges, that it's being regulated, right? And it's being regulated and more sort of nailed down for the consumer protection rights and so on, so that fairly soon this will be all spelled out. And I think especially for the non-for-profits, and in the US, you have that many non-for-profits, right? And always the idea is like how also to streamline so that you can actually use a framework.
Right. So interesting. So then, one thing that we have been kind of in the back of a little bit talking about is that's maybe, like, we have a yearly fundraiser where we ask artists to donate work, and then we make, like we don't do it online, we do it actually mostly in person. We just did it online during COVID because it's such a community space, and I think it kind of resonates with the people to be in person, right? Like, I think that's mainly why. But we have been just through this now, talking a little bit of what the possibilities would be to also do, like include some NFTs maybe in the fundraiser. That is.
Yeah, of course. I think I really loved what Sotheby's just did. They did the NFT sale of native digital art. It just ended on June 10. And they actually sold, let's say, work that from the first NFT by known artists, very well-known artists, and they did it. So they sold the NFTs, and of course it's an auction. Of course the prices are like, I don't know, quite high, I'd say. But I think there is, the notion is out there, so that it's not sort of a marketplace that it's where sort of fairly anonymous artists put up art as an NFT and another anonymous person buys it. Right. So I think sort of the framework for you as a non-commercial space is definitely there, right? So I think and it will be just adapted and adopted. So I wouldn't see I wouldn't hesitate, so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's an interesting way. I thought it was also really great how you explained the social media effects, and now, you know, and now what's happening now with NFT. I thought that was a really good way to make others maybe also understand on how.
But MONIKA, but I think we as people in the art world, where we see and speak to artists and people that love art, right? So, and in many ways, it's a combination of physical and digital, right? So it's physical and digital, right? In interaction and how we see art in our professional life. And what we really just have to come to terms with, and this is really what I thought in COVID last year, I think in September, it really hit me. So like, we have to say goodbye to the way we did, I don't know, business or transacted pre-COVID. Mm-hmm. And it sort of was hard to say, yeah. So, but we have to say goodbye, and all the art people that love physical art to death, right, and love the artist and love the meaning of every piece, but we have to understand that technology, as I said, with social media, with having an e-commerce platform where you sell books, and how we tracked user engagement and clicks of our websites, this is just a professional a staple of our professional life. Yeah, this is just another tool, but it's a driver, right? If we cannot use technological tools, and there will be many more to come, if we will not be able to learn, right? If we give up and say, this is not for me, our businesses or our community outreach, because there are people who will engage and will love that and so on and so on. So it's just, we have to accept it as a given that we have to engage. Right. And I think this was a hard one when I said, because I remember how hard it was for galleries with the social media. Because I mean, like, I do so much already. I cannot just put another photo of myself out every 2 days. This is just crazy, right? But then eventually people learn to use it more as a tool, right? And have like less emotions about it, I guess, right? At the beginning than at the beginning. And just it. So I'm just saying, this is really, technology is one leg of that, yeah, and of anything that's going to come. I mean, good and bad, right? There's much good about it, but it's also many challenges, and yeah.
Right. No, I mean, everything has to. I do really I do really believe that it is a tool that can be beneficial, but it has to also really be used, like all of these things. If it's being taken over by people that misuse it, then it's a problem. If it's been used by people that use it properly and and make good use of it, I think it can be great, right? But that's probably where.
Too, there's like a question of governance, and this is something that Christina's company is intentionally focused on. So, in blockchains, certain nodes, and node is just, another word for computer, basically. And like a computer has a human behind it. Okay. So like certain humans, right, like have governance abilities because they've either mined so much cryptocurrency or they have special tokens, that they've been allotted and what have you, and so in the art world, of course, governance is multifaceted, and it consists of, the same types of consensus triggers. We have curators, critics, although maybe their influence is waning. We have collectors, right? Because money talks. And, we have the artists that become so successful that they then are sort of gatekeepers, and we can kind of take those same consensus mechanisms, maybe not as rigid, maybe not as many entries to barrier, and we can kind of apply those to the blockchain so that, on our chain, at least on the blockchain.art chain, the BCA chain, we're going to be able to issue governance tokens to certain stakeholders so that they can participate in how the chain develops, what updates are implemented, if there's nefarious actors, like let's kick them off, that sort of thing. And so there are these like governance structures that are also in play in the blockchain. And we can do it in a way that's sustainable, that's ethical, that provides equity, where there hasn't maybe been equity in the past.
Right.
I think that if we just, approach it with the mind frame that we're going to do it responsibly, then hopefully we can maintain some control over that.
All of these rules that you're talking about remind me a lot when I, in the times when we didn't have money at all, and when we tried to get all these programs for free and use blockchains, and there were all these rules on how to be a good player in the system. Yeah, I participated there.
Right.
But it's similar, I guess, right? I mean, in some cases.
I mean, you're also going to have certain like network actors kind of, maybe transition from being what some would consider like someone quite sinister, like speculator, like in that sense, like maybe like, like a Stefan Simkowitz type character who now is representing artists, has a gallery space. Like he's maybe gone from like the quote dark side and come over to, like the light side. And I feel like we also have to allow for people to evolve. The technology will evolve, people will evolve, and it's really, as a society, as a community, as an ecosystem, we just need to sort of try to direct it in the most positive way possible.
Right.
It's going to take everyone's commitment, but
right.
I think that we'll see, like I can't predict the future, neither can you,
right.
I assume, but I know that it's going to be interesting,
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. I mean, I think, right, I just have the feeling I could talk forever, because it's super interesting and super fascinating, but I also don't want to overdo it with the timing. So I just, unless we have like another big question. Michelle, do you have another question that you want to ask?
I mean, I have one. I have many questions, but I have one that keeps running through my mind. And while we have you, I want to ask you something that's maybe basic, which is what are the best resources right now? What are the artists, the institutions right now that are doing a good job at educating? Oh.
I highly recommend this book, right?
Okay.
But this book is also like probably outdated now because, you know, Christina was talking about like Kevin McCoy, who minted his NFT in like 2014 or like 2012 or something. Like this book, it's called Artists, Are You Thinking the Blockchain? So essentially this was put out by a think tank in London called Further Afield, and FACT, which is the Foundation for Art and Creative Technology at the University of Liverpool, I believe. And they put this book out in 2017. And this book, I think, does a really excellent job of, you know, investigating all these different angles of the blockchain, because NFTs, you know, you have to like, it's still the blockchain. So that's really, you know, the basis. But they definitely open this book by saying, you know, the first sentence is that the blockchain is Janus faced, which is essentially this two-sided coin theory that I've been talking about. And I couldn't agree more. So I would say that's a terrific resource. I think Christina mentioned Tim Schneider before, who writes for ArtNet. Tim Schneider does a fabulous job unpacking this technology. So I would highly recommend, you know, him. Casey Rees, that's Casey with a C, and Rees, R-E-A-S. He's a professor at UCLA in the digital media studies program and design. And he actually started something called the Processing Foundation. Processing is like a creative programming language that artists use. But he wrote an article in 2019 called Collecting in the Age of Digital Reproduction, which is like an obvious nod to Walter Benjamin and, you know, the Aura and what have you. So I would say that he's another one. I would highly recommend that article. Amy Whitaker is an assistant professor at NYU Steinhardt School of Culture, Education, and Human Development. She's done a lot of terrific writing that, you know, puts in plain English a lot of sort of, you know, all of the concepts and theories and applications and, you know, trepidation and optimism and, you know, all of these kind of contradictory emotions. So those would be my recommendations. Christina, I'm sure you have others.
I think so. I started with the same book that Emily showed, but I think in terms of keeping up with the recent sort of, let's say, detailed development, I definitely would say from a, let's say, more technological end would be probably OpenSea and their output, what they put out on Twitter. I think that's fair to just to see, to read, and just make it sort of the everyday intake. And I think Kenny Schachter is actually, he is very enthusiastic about blockchain and NFTs, and he's been selling NFTs. And I think he is a true sort of warrior with respect to sort of, though done very enthusiastically, but also taking sort of the traditional world under their wings and sort of trying to bridge really his enthusiasm and why he is that enthusiastic about it. And I think he is, in terms of sort of real world implication and application, I think this is good to follow. But I think if you do that, and if you've read the book, I think it's a bit also looking at sales. So there were galleries that have been working in the NFT space a little bit, right? So you have Postmasters in New York, right? So they are about to launch their own chain, so to speak. I mean, this is still not like hyper clear all the details surrounding it. I think they're great conversation partners just to talk about it, and because they've been showing art for the last 40 years, digital art. And then I think another is another resource is Annika Meyer. She is writing for Monopole, and she's a writer / curator, and she curated a couple of shows in one show in Decentraland, but also where she navigated through different platforms and how to use it. And I think she's definitely one that has sort of real life experience and sort of how to apply that technology. And then it's also Jesse Damiani. He just curated a show that in Linz, and he's a writer / curator from New York, actually. And he curated just a show that opened, I think, on Wednesday last week. And this sort of is the history of NFTs, not really, but it spans, it doesn't start with 2021 February, but it basically shows how digital files were used. So they have a show, and I think they are great resources, as in the real life and the professional application. But everyone is sort of, I can say, artists and curators and sort of spaces are on their own journey to making experiences. And what is, I guess, the most dangerous thing, and I think also galleries that have been doing experiments in that space, is sort of this, there's no magic, right? So magic is not going to happen. It's just a technology. So to believe that if you're just gonna do an NFT and you just magically gonna sell, I don't know, 100 times, it's not gonna happen, right? So ultimately, every artist is still affected by very similar or the same market forces as in the physical. Yeah. And I think this was what seemed at the beginning, when sort of the crypto and the NFT hype started, that anyone who puts out an NFT would be magically picked up by this other magical, unidentified ID, and it's not going to happen, right? So there was this moment of that speculation bubble. And it had different market forces than, do I really love that art? Do I really love that art? It was just underlying different forces than, why do I buy that artist? Why do I get to that artist? So, and now we are very much back in that world, in that real world, where NFT or poster, you still have to make a case, why is that art significant or relevant, right? And just to believe that this is just the magic's gonna happen, and then to be disappointed that magic is not gonna happen, I think that's where, I mean, people are sobering up again, right? But I think this is just to understand that the work that you've done as a space, it's not lost because of NFTs, right? So it has the same significance and value. And eventually, yes, there will be people that are searching the space for NFTs that you don't know, which is great, which should be happening, right? Because they're looking and they will come to you, that's great. But it's your hard work will continue to be hard work.
Right. That totally makes sense.
So that's great. Then, well, thank you so much, I guess, right? Thank you for this beautiful afternoon for me, evening for you.
Thank you. Yes, it was really, really, really interesting. Super informative. And also kind of reassuring that this is probably a good thing.